Taman's head dropped forward for the third time that hour. He jerked awake, blinking at the holographic display floating above Professor Velthar's crystalline appendages. The professor looked like a giant mantis made of purple glass, and his voice created strange humming sounds that the translator chips converted into words. Right now, those words were about some ancient war that happened 5,000 years ago. Taman tried to care. He really did. The classroom on Galactic Academy Station held students from 17 different species. Some breathed different air through masks. Others sat in specialized chairs that held their unusual body shapes. A few floated in contained atmosphere bubbles. They all seemed interested in the lecture. Well, everyone except Taman. His friend Hana sat 2 rows ahead, taking notes on her datapad with the focus of someone actually awake. She was studying medicine and took everything seriously. On his left, a Quilnari student with 6 eyes kept glancing at him with what his translator interpreted as disgust. Apparently, sleeping during class was insulting to Quilnari culture. Taman would apologize, but he was too tired to remember the proper gesture. Professor Velthar's lecture droned on about the extinction wars and how they shaped the current treaty system. Something about species that killed other species, and the rules made afterward to prevent it happening again. Important stuff, probably. Taman's eyes grew heavy again. His datapad buzzed. He glanced down, grateful for the distraction. A news alert scrolled across the screen. A prison transport had crashed 3 systems away. Several prisoners escaped, including members of something called the Kethrak. The article called them death cultists and galaxy-class predators. There was a grainy image of one. It looked like someone crossed a spider with a knife collection and gave it anger issues. Taman showed the alert to Hana after class ended. They walked through the station's main corridor toward the cafeteria. The hallway curved upward in both directions, following the station's ring structure. Shops and restaurants lined both sides, catering to hundreds of species with different dietary needs. Kethrak, Hana read aloud, her dark eyes scanning the text. It says they have never been defeated in single combat. Their entire culture revolves around killing. They consider murder to be a religious experience. Sounds unpleasant, Taman said, yawning. A group of Relnian students rushed past them, their reptilian tails swishing in agitation. They were large beings, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick scales that served as natural armor. If they were worried, it was probably serious. Yawned met them at the cafeteria entrance. She was an engineering student, always covered in grease or coolant or some other fluid from whatever machine she was fixing. Today her hands were clean, which meant she was between projects. Did you see the alert? Yawned asked, grabbing a tray. About the escaped prisoners? Hana confirmed. Yeah, everyone's freaking out. My Telvian lab partner said his entire family is going into hibernation sleep until the Kethrak are caught. He said it's an instinct thing. When Kethrak are hunting, his species shuts down to avoid detection. Taman collected his lunch, something that approximated rice and vegetables, though the station's food synthesizers never quite got Earth food right. Seems like an overreaction. The crash was 3 systems away. Yawned shrugged. Apparently these things can track prey across multiple systems, and they never give up once they start hunting. They found a table near the viewing window. Beyond the transparent aluminum, a yellow-orange planet rotated slowly. The station orbited just outside the planet's atmosphere, positioned at a neutral point between several territorial boundaries. It made the station a safe place for different species to meet and study together. Usually, as they ate, the cafeteria's normal noise level dropped. Students were checking their datapads, reading the same news alerts. Conversations shifted from homework and social plans to security protocols and evacuation procedures. A Hinari student with blue fur started crying, making high-pitched sounds that hurt Taman's ears. Her friends surrounded her, offering comfort. Look at everyone, Hana observed quietly. They are all terrified. Should we be terrified? Taman asked, genuinely curious. Yawned thought about it. I have a project due next week. Can't really afford to be terrified right now. Maybe I will panic after I finish the coolant system redesign. Another alert arrived, this time station-wide. Security Chief Cross's voice boomed through the speakers. Cross was Vrelnian, one of the warrior species known for their combat abilities. His translated words were clipped and professional. All students and staff are advised to proceed to their assigned quarters immediately. This is a precautionary lockdown. Security teams are monitoring all entry points. There is no immediate danger, but we ask everyone to follow protocols. Classes are suspended until further notice. The cafeteria erupted into controlled chaos. Different species reacted in different ways. Some ran. Others moved in tight defensive groups. A few seemed to collapse in place, probably those hibernation sleep responses Yawned mentioned. The three humans finished their lunch at a reasonable pace. Hana wanted to stop by the medical library first to return some research materials. Yawned needed to check on an experiment she was running in the engineering lab. Taemin just wanted to go back to his room and sleep properly. They split up at the corridor junction. Taemin headed toward the residential wing, passing security teams in heavy armor taking positions at key intersections. The Vrelnian guards looked nervous, which was strange. These were trained warriors, veterans of real combat. What could make them afraid? His datapad buzzed again. More news updates. The Kethrak prisoners had stolen a fast attack ship. They were heading toward this sector. Estimated arrival time was unknown, because their ship was faster than most military vessels. Fleet Command was scrambling interceptors, but there was a chance the Kethrak might reach the station first. Taemin read this information while walking. He tried to feel worried. People kept saying he should worry more about things. His mother said it. His professors said it. Even Hana said it sometimes. But worry seemed like wasted energy. Either the Kethrak would get here or they would not. Either security would stop them, or they would not. His worrying would not change any of those outcomes. He reached his quarters and palmed the door lock. The small room beyond was typical student housing. A bed, a desk, a small bathroom, and a wall screen. He had some pictures from Earth on the walls. Seoul at night, Jeju Island beaches, his family's apartment building. Another alert came through. The lockdown was now mandatory. No one was permitted in the corridors without security escort. Emergency force fields were activating throughout the station. All external docking ports were sealed. Taemin changed into comfortable clothes and lay down on his bed. Outside his window, station security ships zipped past, taking defensive positions around the structure. In the distance, he could see larger military vessels arriving, their weapon systems probably armed and ready. It all seemed very exciting, but also very far away from his immediate concerns, which mainly involved getting some decent sleep before whatever happened next. His eyes closed. Within minutes, he was dreaming about home. The alarms woke Taemin 6 hours later. Red lights flashed in his room, pulsing in rhythm with the warning sirens. His datapad was vibrating so hard it fell off his desk. He picked it up and read the emergency message displayed across the screen. Critical alert. Hostile breach. Deck. 7 Section C. All personnel shelter in place. Security responding. Taemin sat up and rubbed his eyes. The lockdown was supposed to prevent this. The military ships outside were supposed to stop anything from getting close. Apparently, something had gotten through anyway. He accessed the station's public security feed. The video was dark and full of static, but he could make out shapes moving through a corridor. Security teams in full combat armor were firing weapons at something large and fast. The creature moved like liquid shadow, dodging between support pillars and ceiling fixtures. When it struck, the security guards went down immediately. The camera cut out. Another feed showed a different corridor. More bodies. More of that dark shape moving with impossible speed. Taemin counted 6 limbs, each one ending in blades that seemed to be part of the creature's body rather than held weapons. His door chimed. The standard class reminder? Apparently Professor Velthar had not received word that classes were canceled, or maybe the professor believed the lockdown was just a drill. Either way, Taemin was expected in Classroom 7 Delta for Interstellar Law. He checked the station map. His classroom was 3 sections away. The breach was on Deck 7. Section C, his classroom, was Deck 7. Section D, not ideal, but the connecting corridors were supposed to be sealed with emergency bulkheads. Taemin dressed and left his quarters. The residential hallway was empty and quiet except for the alarms. Emergency lighting cast everything in red. He walked toward the classroom, following the familiar route he took every day. A security patrol stopped him at the first intersection. 2 Vrelnian guards, their scales dulled with stress, blocked his path. "Student, you must return to quarters," the first guard said. His translator chip made his voice sound calm, but his tail was lashing back and forth in clear agitation. "I have class," Taemin explained, showing his datapad with the class schedule. The guards looked at each other. The second one spoke into his communicator. checking something with Central Command. After a moment, he nodded to Taemin. Proceed directly to your classroom. Do not stop. Do not deviate from the main corridor. The professor should not have called class, but if you are going, go quickly. Taemin thanked them and continued walking. Behind him, he heard one guard whisper to the other in a frequency his translator barely caught. The human is either very brave or very stupid. I think humans do not understand danger the way we do, the other replied. Taemin reached classroom 7 Delta and entered. About half the students were there, looking nervous and clustered in small groups based on species. Professor Velthar stood at the front, his crystalline body reflecting the red emergency lights in strange patterns. Ah, Taemin, the professor said. Good, please take your seat. We will continue our discussion of treaty obligations during emergency situations. Quite relevant to current events, yes? Taemin moved to his usual seat in the back corner. It was the best position for staying awake during boring lectures, though he usually failed anyway. Today, though, the other students were alert. Some were shaking. Others had their data pads open to security feeds, watching the situation unfold in other parts of the station. More students arrived in small groups, escorted by security. Eventually, 43 beings filled the classroom. Professor Velthar sealed the door and lowered the light slightly as if that would help them hide. The lecture began. Professor Velthar discussed ancient treaties and mutual defense obligations. His voice hummed with forced calm. Every few minutes, the station shook slightly. Distant sounds echoed through the ventilation system. Weapons fire, screaming. The sound of metal being torn apart. Taemin's head drooped. The adrenaline from waking up had faded. The warm classroom and the professor's steady voice made staying awake difficult. His eyes closed, he dreamed of home again. His mother's cooking. The sound of traffic outside their apartment. The comfortable weight of his cat sleeping on his chest. Something changed in the classroom. Taemin noticed it even through his sleep. The other students had gone completely silent. Professor Velthar had stopped lecturing. The only sound was breathing, 43 beings trying not to make noise. Taemin opened one eye slightly. Through the small window in the classroom door, he saw movement in the corridor. Something large was passing by. The shadow moved with purpose, checking each door, each junction, each possible hiding place. It stopped at their door. The creature beyond was massive. Through the window, Taemin could see its face, if it could be called a face. Multiple eyes arranged in a circular pattern. A mouth that opened in 4 directions, showing rows of teeth designed for tearing. Chitin armor covered its body, black and shiny, designed by evolution to intimidate as much as to protect. This was a Kethrak. The thing from the news alerts. The Galaxy-class predator. The thing that made entire species hibernate in fear. It looked directly through the window. Those multiple eyes focused on the classroom full of prey. Its claws, each one longer than Taemin's forearm, began to tear at the door. The reinforced metal screeched in protest but began to give way. Security doors were designed to stop fires and hull breaches, not determined predators. A Hinari student in the front row started crying again, the same high-pitched sound from the cafeteria. Others began making their own species-specific fear responses. Prayers in various languages. Chemical releases that filled the room with stress pheromones. One student simply fell over, unconscious from shock. The door shredded. Pieces of metal fell inward, clattering on the floor. The Kethrak's full form filled the doorway. It was even larger than it appeared on the video feeds. 6 limbs, each capable of independent movement. Blades that seemed to grow from its arms and legs. A body built for murder, refined over millions of years of evolution. It entered the classroom slowly, savoring the moment. Its head swiveled, taking in all the prey species cowering before it. This was what Kethrak lived for. This was their religious experience. The fear of others was their sustenance. And then Taemin yawned. It was not a small yawn. It was not polite. It was the kind of jaw-cracking yawn that happens when someone is pulled from deep sleep against their will. His mouth opened wide. His eyes squeezed shut. A small sound escaped his throat, somewhere between satisfaction and annoyance. The Kethrak froze. Taemin blinked, focusing on the creature blocking the doorway. He had been sleeping so well. Now there was noise and commotion, and this thing was in the way. He stood up slowly, stretching his arms over his head. His back popped in several places. "Is class over?" he asked, his voice still rough with sleep. The classroom remained silent. Every other being stared at him in absolute horror. Professor Velthar made a sound like breaking glass, which his translator interpreted as a scream too intense for words. The Kethrak tilted its head. Its multiple eyes focused on this one human. Its sensory organs extended, trying to analyze what it was perceiving. This creature before it showed no fear response, no elevated heart rate, no stress chemicals, no preparation for fight or flight, just annoyance at being woken up. Taemin walked forward, heading toward the door. He needed to get past the Kethrak to leave. The creature was large and taking up most of the doorway. Taemin made a small gesture with his hand. The universal sign for "excuse me, can you move?" he asked. "I need to get past." The Kethrak stepped backward. It was an unconscious movement, pure instinct. Predators know prey. Prey runs or fights. This did neither. This was something else. Something unknown. And unknown things, even for galaxy-class predators, were dangerous. Taemin waited in the doorway for a moment. The creature still blocked his path, but now it seemed uncertain. Its blades retracted slightly. Its body lowered into a defensive posture rather than an attacking one. Then, just as suddenly as it arrived, the Kethrak turned and ran. Its 6 limbs carried it down the corridor at incredible speed. Within seconds, it disappeared around a corner, leaving only the sound of claws on metal deck plating. Taemin turned back to the classroom. Everyone was still frozen in place, so class is over? He asked again. Professor Velthar managed to nod, though his crystalline body was visibly trembling. Taemin left the classroom and headed back toward his quarters. He was still tired. A good predator attack should not interrupt a decent sleep schedule. Scarveth ran through the station corridors without direction or purpose. This had never happened before. In 10,000 hunts across 100 worlds, prey always responded correctly. They ran, which triggered the chase. They fought, which engaged combat instincts. They froze in fear, which made the kill simple and satisfying. But that human did none of these things. Scarveth found a maintenance shaft and climbed inside, needing time to process what happened. The creature's mind, designed for hunting and killing, struggled with this new input. Every instinct, every biological imperative, every cultural teaching said that fear was universal. Predators inspired fear. Prey felt fear. This was the way of things across the galaxy. The human yawned. Scarveth's secondary brain, the one that handled complex problem-solving, worked through the encounter again. The human's body language showed no threat assessment, no adrenaline spike, no preparation for confrontation. Instead, the being displayed irritation at being disturbed, as if a galaxy-class predator was an inconvenience, like noise from a neighbor. This was wrong. This broke every rule of predator and prey dynamics. This meant something was fundamentally different about humans. Scarveth needed another hunt to restore confidence. There were thousands of beings on this station. Surely the next encounter would be normal. The Kethrak emerged from the maintenance shaft into a medical wing. Bright white lights and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. Different chemical scents marked this as a treatment area for multiple species. A nurse station stood empty, abandoned when the breach alarm sounded. Down a side corridor, Scarveth heard movement. Someone working, the sound of equipment being arranged and used. The predator moved silently, approaching the source of the noise. A human female stood in a laboratory surrounded by holographic displays showing molecular structures. She wore a white coat and protective gloves, working with samples in sealed containers. Her dark hair was pulled back from her face. Her attention was completely focused on her work. Scarveth entered the lab. This would be better. This human would respond properly. The female looked up from her work, her eyes meeting the Kethrak's multiple eyes. For a moment, Scarveth felt the familiar satisfaction. Now she would scream. Now she would run. Now the hunt would proceed correctly. "Be quiet, please," Hana said, turning back to her samples. "I am trying to concentrate." Scarveth stood completely still. This was the second human, the second impossible response. The female had not even stopped working. She glanced at the galaxy-class predator like it was a minor interruption. "This is important research," Hana continued, adjusting her equipment. The Telvian colony on Deck 4 has a fungal infection spreading through their environmental systems. If I do not finish this cure by tomorrow, 12 beings will die. So please, either help or leave. The Kethrak took a step forward, trying to trigger some response. Any response? Hana sighed and turned around fully. Look, I understand you are probably one of those escaped Kethrak everyone is worried about. That is unfortunate for you and for station security. But I have work to do. The station medical bay needs this cure. People are depending on me. Your murder religion or whatever will have to wait. She turned back to her samples. Scarveth left the laboratory, more confused than before. 2 humans. 2 impossible reactions. This could not be coincidence. There was something about this species that broke all understanding of prey behavior. The Kethrak moved to a different section of the station, following maintenance tunnels to avoid security teams. Eventually, it emerged in the engineering levels, where the station's critical systems hummed and whirred. The air was warmer here, full of ozone and coolant vapors. Ahead, someone was working on a large pipe junction. Warning signs in multiple languages indicated high pressure and dangerous temperature. The person working wore protective gear and seemed completely absorbed in the repair. Scarveth approached. This was the 3rd human, another female. She had a welding tool in one hand and a scanner in the other. The pipe she was repairing showed stress fractures and was leaking a greenish fluid. Yawned noticed the Kethrak's reflection in her scanner display. She looked up briefly, took in the massive predator standing 3 meters away and returned to her work. If you are going to kill me, wait 10 minutes, she said, her voice muffled by the protective mask. This coolant line feeds the habitat pods for the Vritnian students. If it ruptures completely, they will suffocate. Their atmosphere is pressurized in those pods. A total failure would kill them faster than you could. Scarveth watched as the human worked. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, sealing fractures and reinforcing weak points. She showed no fear, no distraction. Her entire focus was on the task. There are easier ways to die, Yawned continued, talking while she worked. This coolant is toxic to most species. One crack in my suit and I am dead in about 90 seconds. But someone has to fix this, and I am the only one qualified who is small enough to fit in this junction. So here I am. She finished the repair and tested the seal. The scanner showed green across all readings. Satisfied, she packed up her tools and finally looked directly at Scarveth. Okay, I am done. You can do your thing now. Though honestly, after dealing with this coolant system, getting killed by a predator seems almost relaxing. Scarveth did not move. Could not move. 3 humans. 3 identical responses. This was not coincidence. This was not bravery. This was something else entirely. The Kethrak left the engineering level and returned to the maintenance tunnels. Its mind, trained for hunting, tried to process this information. Humans did not lack fear. They acknowledged danger. The male in the classroom was annoyed. The female in the medical lab was focused on her work. The female in engineering calculated risk but proceeded anyway. They all saw the threat. They all understood the danger. They simply chose not to prioritize it. This concept was alien to Kethrak psychology. For Scarveth's species, threats were immediate and absolute. You hunted or you were hunted. You killed or you died. There was no middle ground, no calculation of competing priorities. But humans had competing priorities. They had research to finish, repairs to complete, sleep to catch up on. And apparently a single predator did not rank high enough on their list of concerns to interrupt these tasks. Scarveth began hunting other species again, trying to restore some sense of normalcy. A Quilnari student died quickly, its fear making the kill satisfying. 2 Vritnian guards fought back, providing decent combat before falling. A Hinari merchant tried to run, triggering the chase instinct perfectly, but the satisfaction was gone. Every kill felt hollow now, because somewhere on this station were 3 humans who proved that fear was not universal, who demonstrated that prey could simply choose not to be prey. This realization was poison to Scarveth's worldview. The Kethraks, entire culture spanning millions of years of evolution, was based on being the ultimate predator, the thing that all other species feared, the terror that made civilizations tremble, and humans had yawned at it. Station security found Scarveth in a cargo bay 2 hours later. The Kethrak was sitting among supply crates, not hiding, not hunting, just sitting. When the security team surrounded it with weapons ready, Scarveth did not fight. The creature simply stood up and allowed itself to be restrained. Chief Cross, leading the security team personally, could not understand what he was seeing. Kethrak never surrendered. They fought until killed. Surrender was not part of their psychology. "Why do you stop?" Cross asked, his translator making the question sound more like a demand. Scarveth looked at the Vrelnian security chief with its multiple eyes. Through the translator device attached to its restraints, it spoke for the first time since boarding the station. "I need to speak with the humans," it said. "I need to understand what they are." Word spread quickly through the station. The Kethrak had surrendered. It wanted to talk to humans. Specifically, it wanted to talk to the 3 humans it encountered during its rampage. Station command, military advisors, and various government representatives debated for 6 hours about whether to allow this meeting. Some argued it was too dangerous. Others said it was a unique opportunity to study Kethrak psychology. A few suggested it was a trap. Eventually, they decided to permit the meeting under heavy security. The 3 humans were contacted and asked if they would participate. Tai Min had been asleep when the message arrived. He read it, shrugged, and agreed. It seemed interesting. Hana was still in her laboratory, having finished the cure and moved on to another project. She agreed to take a break for the meeting. Jiwan was fixing another coolant leak, this one less critical. She said she would come after checking her work twice. The meeting was scheduled for the next morning. 3 humans who had accidentally broken a predator species would sit down with that predator and try to explain something they did not fully understand themselves. The conference room was the most secure location on the station. Reinforced walls. Multiple security teams positioned outside. Internal defense systems ready to activate instantly. Observers watched through one-way glass from an adjacent room, including Chief Cross, Professor Velthar, and several military analysts from different species. Scarveth sat at one end of the table, restrained in a specialized containment field. The field allowed movement and communication, but would paralyze the Kethrak instantly if it attempted violence. Across from the predator sat 3 humans who looked remarkably ordinary. Taemin yawned as he entered, still tired despite sleeping for 12 hours. Hana carried a datapad with her research notes, unable to stop working even for something this important. Jiwan had grease on her hands from another repair job. The 3 humans sat down. Security personnel tensed, ready for any sign of aggression from the Kethrak, but Scarveth remained still, its multiple eyes studying the humans with intense focus. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," Scarveth said through the translator device. Its natural voice was a series of clicks and scraping sounds like knives being sharpened against stone. Taemin nodded. "No problem, though I am not sure what you want to talk about." "I need to understand," Scarveth said. "Why do you not fear me?" The 3 humans looked at each other. Hana spoke first. "I did fear you," she said. "When you entered my laboratory, my heart rate increased. I experienced stress, but I also had work to finish. Fear does not make research happen faster, so I continued working." "You chose your work over your survival," Scarveth said as if testing the concept. "The Telvians needed the cure," Hana explained. "If I ran away from you, they would die anyway. So running seemed pointless. At least by continuing to work, I could help someone." Scarveth turned its attention to Jiwan. "And you? You acknowledged the danger of the coolant leak, but not the danger of me." Jiwan shrugged. "The coolant was definitely going to kill people if I did not fix it. You were only possibly going to kill me. I deal with certain problems before possible problems. That is just basic priority management." "You calculated risk," Scarveth said slowly. "You assessed multiple threats and chose to address the most immediate one." "Yes," Jiwan confirmed. "Is that unusual?" Scarveth's translator made a sound that might have been laughter or distress. "For my species, yes. We respond to threats with instinct. There is no calculation, no priority system, only immediate reaction." The Kethrak turned to Taemin. "And you?" "You yawned. You were annoyed." There was no fear at all. Taemin thought about this. I was asleep. When you woke me up, I was tired and irritated. I guess I did not process the threat properly because I was too focused on wanting to go back to sleep. You prioritized sleep over survival, Scarveth said. I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds stupid, Taemin admitted. But at the moment, yes. I just wanted the noise to stop so I could sleep. In the observation room, the military analysts were recording everything. This conversation was revealing information about human psychology that no one had properly documented before. One analyst, a Quilnari xenobiologist named Kira, spoke quietly to her colleagues. Look at their baseline stress levels. Even now, sitting across from a Kethrak, they register lower stress than most species experience during normal conversation. How is that possible? Chief Cross asked. Their planet, Kira said, pulling up data on her screen. Earth. Look at this report. The screen displayed information about Earth's biosphere. The predator-to-prey ratio, the number of toxic plants, the frequency of natural disasters, the microscopic organisms that could kill in hours, the environmental challenges that shaped human evolution. Everything on that planet tried to kill them, Kira continued. Their ancestors evolved surrounded by constant threats. Predators, disease, weather, other humans. Their nervous system developed to function under permanent stress. What we consider extreme danger, they consider normal background noise. Back in the conference room, Hana was explaining human risk assessment to Scarveth. We experience fear, she said, but we also experience many other things simultaneously. Curiosity, frustration, fatigue, hunger. All of these feelings exist at the same time. Fear is just one input among many. For Kethrak, fear is the input, Scarveth said. When we hunt, we exist only in that moment. There is no distraction, no competing priority, only the hunt. That sounds exhausting, Jiwan said. Scarveth made that sound again, the one between laughter and distress. It is, but it is all we know. Until I encountered you three, I believed all species existed this way. Predators hunt, prey fears. This is universal law. Apparently not, Taemin said. The conversation continued for 2 hours. Scarveth asked questions about human history, culture, and psychology. The humans answered as best they could, though they often seemed confused about why their behavior was considered unusual. Do humans ever feel overwhelming fear? Scarveth asked. Yes, Hana said. Public speaking. Many humans find that terrifying. Speaking? Scarveth's translator conveyed confusion. You fear communication? Specifically speaking in front of large groups, Hana clarified. Being judged by many people simultaneously. But you do not fear death? We do fear death, Jiwan corrected. We just do not fear it every moment. If we stopped to be afraid every time something could kill us, we would never do anything. Earth had too many threats. We had to learn to function despite fear. Scarveth was silent for a long moment. Its multiple eyes closed and opened in a pattern that indicated deep thought. I cannot return to being what I was, the Kethrak finally said. You have broken something in me. The certainty that fear is universal. The belief that being a predator makes one superior. These ideas defined my existence, and what will you do? Taemin asked. I do not know. My people have no concept of changing purpose. We are born to hunt. We live to hunt. We die hunting. There is no alternative path. Hana leaned forward. Maybe you can create an alternative. Study why different species respond to threats differently. Help your people understand that the galaxy is more complex than predator and prey. Kethrak do not study, Scarveth said. We are not scholars. You studied us, Jiwan pointed out. You observed our behavior. You tried to understand why we responded the way we did. That is research. Scarveth's eyes focused on Jiwan with new intensity. You are correct. I did research you. I have never done that before. I have hunted for 10,000 cycles, but I have never sought to understand my prey. The meeting ended soon after. Scarveth was returned to secure holding, while various governments decided what to do with the creature. The three humans left the conference room and returned to their normal lives. But the recording of that conversation spread across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. Every species with access to galactic communication networks watched humans calmly explain to a Kethrak why they could not be bothered to panic properly. Military academies began studying the interaction. What did it mean when a species could not be intimidated? How did you fight enemies who calculated risk instead of feeling fear? What were the strategic implications of a species that prioritized tasks over survival instincts? The humans at Galactic Academy Station remained unaware of most of this attention. They had homework to finish, research to conduct, repairs to complete. Taman returned to falling asleep in Professor Velthar's class. Hana went back to her medical research, finding cures for diseases that affected species she had never met. Yawned continued fixing things that most people were too afraid to approach. They were just students, trying to get through their education. The fact that they had accidentally terrified the galaxy was not really their concern. In his secure cell, Scarveth requested access to academic databases. The request was unusual enough that it went all the way to Station Command for approval. After much debate, they granted limited access to xenobiology and psychology texts. The Kethrak began to read, to study, to try to understand the thing that broke its worldview. It was a small start, but it was a start toward something new. 3 months passed since the incident. The station returned to normal operations, though security remained higher than before. Students returned to classes. Professors continued lectures. Life moved forward the way it always did after a crisis ended. But everything had changed. Taman noticed it first in how other students treated him. They used to ignore him, just another human in the background. Now they stared. They whispered. They kept their distance in hallways. His Quilnari classmate, who once looked at him with disgust for sleeping during lectures, now looked at him with something closer to fear. It is weird, he told Hana and Yawned during lunch. They sat at their usual table near the viewing window. Outside, supply ships came and went, bringing resources from across the sector. People keep asking me for advice on dangerous situations, Yawned said. A Vritnian engineer wanted to know how I stay calm during critical repairs. I told him I just focus on the work. He looked at me like I said something profound. Hana nodded. I had a Telvian medical student ask me how humans cope with fear. I explained that we still feel fear. We just do not let it stop us. She took 3 pages of notes. Professor Velthar's lecture that afternoon was on cultural differences in threat assessment. The professor had published his paper, the one about humans and predator-prey models, and it became required reading at 17 different military academies. Now he was teaching a whole section on human psychology to his interstellar law students. Humans evolved on what we classify as a Class 12 hazard world, Professor Velthar explained. His crystalline body reflected the classroom lights as he gestured at holographic displays. For context, most spacefaring civilizations developed on Class 3 to Class 7 worlds. Earth's hazard rating is the highest of any world that produced sentient life. The display showed images of Earth, beautiful oceans and forests, but also volcanoes, hurricanes, predators, and disease statistics that made several students flinch. Humans developed cognitive abilities that allowed them to function despite constant environmental threats. They learned to prioritize immediate solvable problems over abstract dangers. They developed emotional regulation that prevented paralysis from fear. They created social structures based on cooperation in the face of shared threats. Taman tried to pay attention, but the lecture was making him sleepy. He understood the professor was talking about humans, which meant talking about him, but it all seemed very academic and distant from his actual life. His datapad buzzed. A message from Station Command. They wanted him to attend a ceremony next week. Something about recognition for his role in the Kethrak incident. There would be military officials present. Press coverage. Official statements. Taman sent back a polite decline. He had exams next week. The ceremony would interfere with his study schedule. Station Command sent another message insisting it was important. Taman compromised. He would attend if they scheduled it after his exams and kept it short. He had research to help Hana with afterward. The ceremony happened on a Tuesday morning. Taman, Hana, and Yawned stood on a small stage in the station's main auditorium. Various officials from different species gave speeches about courage and cross-cultural understanding. They presented medals that looked nice but were too heavy to wear comfortably. Chief Cross spoke about how the humans showed that true strength came from calmness under pressure. A Quilnari military commander discussed the strategic implications of fearless soldiers. A Vritnian psychologist talked about emotional regulation techniques. Through it all, the 3 humans stood politely and tried not to look bored. Taman yawned twice. Hana checked her datapad 3 times. Jiwon shifted her weight from foot to foot, clearly thinking about projects that needed attention. After the ceremony, reporters from various species wanted interviews. They asked deep questions about human philosophy and approach to danger. How do you remain calm when facing death? A Telvian journalist asked. Taemin thought about it. I mean, panicking does not help. So why panic? The journalist treated this like profound wisdom. She asked 7 follow-up questions. Another reporter asked Hana about the moment in the medical lab when she told a Kethrak to be quiet. I had work to finish, Hana explained. People were depending on me. The Kethrak could have killed me, yes, but if I stopped working, people would definitely die. One possibility seemed worse than the other. The reporter asked her to explain this calculation in more detail. Hana spent 20 minutes trying to explain something that seemed obvious to her, but apparently was revolutionary to everyone else. Jiwon got similar questions about the coolant leak repair. She explained basic priority management. The reporters acted like she invented a new philosophy. Eventually, the 3 humans escaped the attention and returned to their normal routines. But the impact of their actions continued spreading across the galaxy. Military training programs began incorporating human psychological techniques. Threat priority assessment became a standard course at officer academies. Species tried to teach their soldiers to think like humans, to function despite fear rather than being paralyzed by it. Some species found it impossible. Their biology was too different. Fear responses were too deeply embedded in their nervous systems, but other species began to adapt, to learn, to understand that fear was information, not instruction. The biggest change involved the Kethrak themselves. Scarveth's request to study xenobiology was approved after months of debate. The creature was transferred to a research facility under heavy guard. It began working with scholars from multiple species, trying to understand the psychology of prey. Other Kethrak heard about this. Some considered it heresy. Their entire culture rejected the idea of predators studying prey, but others were curious. If one Kethrak could change, perhaps others could too. A small group of Kethrak researchers formed. They called themselves observers. They studied different species' responses to threats. They tried to understand the diversity of fear responses across the galaxy. They learned that being a predator was not about inspiring fear, it was about understanding behavior. This was revolutionary for a species that spent millions of years believing they were the ultimate hunters. Some Kethrak rejected these ideas completely, but enough were interested that change became possible. 6 months after the incident, Taemin ran into Scarveth on the station. The Kethrak was there for a research conference, presenting a paper on threat response variations among spacefaring species. It was still restrained and guarded, but it moved through the station like a scholar rather than a predator. Hello, Taemin, Scarveth said through its translator. Hi, Taemin replied. How is the research going? Fascinating. I have learned more in 6 months of study than in 10,000 cycles of hunting. Did you know that Hinari use high-pitched sounds to warn their community? Not just to express individual fear? Their panic serves a social purpose. I never understood that when I hunted them. That is interesting, Taemin said, genuinely meaning it. I want to thank you, Scarveth continued. You broke something in me that needed to break. I was locked into one way of existing. You showed me there were alternatives. I just yawned, Taemin said. I was tired. Yes, Scarveth agreed. You were tired, and that simple, honest response changed everything for me. Sometimes the most profound truths are the simplest ones. They talked for a few more minutes before Scarveth needed to attend another conference session. Taemin continued to his class thinking about how strange the galaxy was. He had not tried to change anything. He just wanted to sleep. But apparently that was enough. Professor Velthar's class that day was actually interesting. The professor discussed how small actions could have large consequences, how individual choices created cultural change, how the galaxy was constantly evolving based on unexpected interactions between species. The humans did not set out to change Kethrak psychology, Professor Velthar said. They simply acted according to their nature. But their nature was so different from what the galaxy expected that it created ripples across hundreds of systems. Taemin managed to stay awake for the whole lecture. Afterward, Hana and Jiwon met him for lunch. I got an offer to speak at a medical conference, Hana said. They want me to discuss working under pressure. I told them I just focus on one task at a time. They said that is exactly what they want to hear about. Engineering Academy asked me to guest lecture, Chiwan added, about risk management in critical situations. I am not sure what to say. I just fix things that need fixing. Maybe that is the point, Taman suggested. Everyone else thinks too much about danger. We just think about what needs doing. They ate their lunch discussing exams and projects and normal student concerns. Around them, other species watched and whispered. The humans who faced a Kethrak and yawned. The beings who could not be intimidated. The species that broke every rule about predator and prey. But to Taiman, Hana, and Jiwan, they were just students. They had homework to finish, research to conduct, repairs to complete. The galaxy could think whatever it wanted about humans. That was not really their concern. They had more important things to worry about, like whether the cafeteria would have decent food tomorrow, and if Professor Velthar would accept late assignments, and how to fix the persistent coolant leak on Deck 9 that kept threatening to shut down.